This is The Gorge, a podcast where my friend Sara and I gorge ourselves on overanalyzing a game or game-related topic. You can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/thegorgepodcast, where you give us money and we give you things, and also our show gets better.
Yay!
So, that being said, what are we talking about this week?
This week it's 1996-ish, and you and I are mortal enemies because I had a PS1 and you had an N64.
Yes. It is recess, and we are trying to convince our classmates which birthday party to go to.
And the answer is clearly mine, because I am the way cooler kid here. Yeah, so we were kind of like, well, what do we talk about? And, originally I was like, well, we are just passing the 20th anniversary mark for Final Fantasy VII, but then that would necessitate a Final Fantasy VII replay, because it's been a while for Ben, not for me. So we're like, well, let's just talk about what generation is the N64 and the PS1. It's like 6th or 7th gen.
Let me pull out, because I have the Wikipedia page for the N64 pulled up.
I think it's 6th generation.
Let's see here. 5th
Wow.
generation.
Boy, I'm super off. Okay.
It was
trivia.
That generation was actually not just the N64 and the PS1, but that's all we're going to talk about. It was also included the Sega Saturn.
Yes.
The Genesis Nomad, the Virtual Boy, the Neo Geo Pocket.
Ooh.
The Game Boy Color.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so a pretty decent one.
At least one of those that you just listed wasn't a complete and total disaster.
Yeah.
The Virtual Boy. I feel like we could have like a tangent for the Virtual Boy in which you basically just go, who the fuck thought of this? Like, who thought the Virtual Boy was a good idea? I want to know. I need to know.
Actually, I can tell you who did it.
Who?
Because, it was someone very important, and I can't remember his name now.
If it was like Miyamoto or like Iwata, I would be like, really, guys? Really?
It was, I think it was Gunpei Yokoi.
I don't know the name.
He was the general manager for Nintendo's R&D. He's like the creator of the Game Boy.
Oh.
And he also created Metroid and Kid Icarus.
Oh, okay, so he's like a really big deal. Oh, no.
Yeah, so like he had a tremendous legacy, and then he made the Virtual Boy.
Oh, no. Not the Virtual Boy. Oh, it's so
It
bad.
had Jack Bros, though, so it was great.
It had Jack Bros and could probably give anybody a seizure. Have you ever seen?
Oh, I played one.
Oh, shut the fuck up.
I played
For
one,
real?
yeah. There was a
man.
display case in the Toys R Us near my house when it was around. No, not Toys R Us. It was a toy store in the mall, and it was like one of those like ones that weren't as big as Toys R Us.
Oh, like one of the little small chains? I couldn't like FAO Schwartz or whatever.
Yeah, like that one. And it's
Yeah.
and they had one on the shelf, and I played Mario Tennis in it.
Oh boy.
And it was not a fun experience, I'll tell you that much.
This is why Ben has to wear glasses now, kids. Because he played a Virtual Boy.
I played it for
his
15
formative years.
seconds, and then it destroyed my eyeballs.
Yeah, that's exactly it, yeah. But no, we're not talking about that. Well, we'll kind of have a slight secondary tangent. We could probably, like, count the tangents in this episode, because
Yeah.
it feels like a tangent episode. We'll have, like, a small one about the Sega Saturn, but that's coming in a bit. But to start off, it's the 90s, and the N64 and the PlayStation 1 are both out, and the PS1 is just killing the N64 in sales, which is really weird to me to this day.
It's weird. I looked at the sales numbers, and the PS1, because we did that whole episode about console sales, and the PS1 was over 100 million.
Yeah.
And the N64 barely beat 30 million.
Yeah, and to me, what makes it so weird is like the cultural ubiquity of the N64. But I'm wondering if it's just because like video game, like the people who owned N64s were like video game people, and then like normal people owned PS1s. You know?
Yeah, the vast majority of my PS1 experience was playing at people's houses who weren't really gamers.
Yeah,
they had one because like they probably got it as like a birthday present, and it was one of their many things that they did, and it wasn't really like a big deal for them. Mm-hmm. And unlike if you had an N64, like you were a bit more dedicated to playing video games.
Yeah, because like, you know, it's weird in the circle of video game people. It seems like everybody's kind of played the staples that were on the N64. Ocarina of Time, Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, stuff like that. Those are all, in our circle of friends, those are things that everybody played. And I mean, especially things like Zelda and Mario, they sold like gangbusters. I mean, if you had an N64, you had those games.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, but you think about like the sales numbers and that's really kind of what blows my mind the most is that the PS1 has an incredible cultural legacy if we're just, you know, talking about, say, the RPG genre in general. But it's weird that for a system that was pretty soundly beaten by Sony, it's really bizarre to me the kind of cultural foothold that the N64 has managed to establish.
It has. I think it has way more of like a recognizability than the PS1 did.
Yeah, especially with the shitty controller.
Yeah, well, you know what? You know what? I wrote about that in my notes.
Oh,
and, you know what? We had a weird controller. You know, we did. It was weird. It had 3 prongs. Mm-hmm. Hey, you know what else our controller had right out the gate? An analog stick.
Go fuck yourself.
Have you looked recently at a original PS1 controller?
It's bizarre.
Hit with this, like, wave of, look at this off-brand controller?
Pseudo-tangent number 3. My first job was at a GameStop, and I started at a GameStop back when GameStop still sold PS1 games, which really betrays my age. Nothing kind of gives away the fact that Sara is almost 30. Quite like, I worked at GameStop when we sold PS1 games. And we had a big bin in front of the store for old shitty PS1 accessories. And it was just a garbage bin. Like, you could go through it and you'd find, like, controllers whose batteries had exploded. It was like that, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I remember finding an old original PS1 controller in there, and I think I did ask my manager at that time, I'm like, what is this piece of shit off-brand thing? And my manager's name was like Kelsey. It was like a guy named Kelsey. And Kelsey looks at me and he's like, that was what the original PS1 controller looked like. Because when I got my PS1, I got the version that had the analog sticks on it already. And so I had no idea until that moment when I was like 17. And I was like, holy shit. What a stupid idea.
Because it would be like inconceivable. You're making a 3D console and you don't have an analog stick?
Yeah, that makes, navigating a 3D space more doable. Like, what? Who thought? And then I went back and I replayed Final Fantasy VII a few years ago and I realized it doesn't have analog stick support.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. It's so
only has D-pad. And it has fundamentally broken D-pad. I hate the directional controls in Final Fantasy VII on the PS1. I think they fixed it in the Vita version.
I think they did too.
But it's like, I'm going to press up. Oh, Cloud is going northeast now. Because the way this map is oriented, that's the direction.
Yeah, this is great. Oh my god, it's so bad. And I didn't remember that at all. Even though I played Final Fantasy VII like a ton as a kid, I just remember it steering perfectly fine with the D-pad, but I guess I was just a dumb baby and it made sense to me at the time, but now I'm a grown-up and I've had like more sophisticated controls, and I'm like, I can never go back.
Well, it's something that kind of like encapsulates both of these consoles, is that like there's a lot of games, because like this system came out for you and me like kind of in like our fundamental growth periods of like adapting to the world around us, you know?
Right.
And like, so there's a lot of games that on the N64 that I played and didn't get, and then like years later I'm like, oh, that's what they were trying to do.
Yes. It's astonishing. Children are stupid. I think that's really like the one thing you should really take away from this podcast. Oh, humble listeners. Babies are dumb and children are dumber. Because, like, when I was a kid, I didn't understand video games, like, at all. I'm like, what do these numbers mean? Because even when I was a kid, I was a fucking loser playing JRPGs. And I'm like, what do all these fucking numbers mean? And why is this game so hard? And then I grew up and I played it again, you know, and not even, like, grew up. Like, I was 14, and I replayed some of this, and I was like, was I an idiot? Was I stupid? I don't remember being stupid. But I'm breezing through these games because I suddenly understand what the fucking numbers mean. And it's like, oh, I must have been stupid.
There was one game on the N64 called Mischief Makers. And it is one of the most fun games I've ever played. And I wish I could go back and play it now, because it's hard to find a copy of it online, and they don't sell it like digital distribution. It's because it's by Treasure, so it's a third-party game, so Nintendo doesn't own the license to it.
Right, so Nintendo doesn't care, right?
Yes, so it's a game that's like, it was like a platformer where instead of like normal punching, you could grab items and shake them instead, or throw them. And I didn't understand that as a kid, because I'm so used to games where you like jump on enemies or whatever.
Right.
And now I'm like, oh, I want to go back and play that because I suddenly understand what this game was trying to do.
Because suddenly I'm not a dumb baby anymore.
And it was also one of the few games in the N64's lifetime that actually used the D-pad.
Oh, God. Yeah. Like I said, we owned an N64, sort of. We didn't play it that much. We played the PS1 more. To this day, I'm still not entirely sure how you're actually supposed to hold that thing.
Your right hand goes where the C buttons are, the A and B button and the C buttons, and your left hand goes in the middle prong of the analog stick is.
Weird.
Because then your left pointer finger can rest on the Z button on the back of the controller.
So strange. Such a strange.
It is if you pick up an N64 controller now, your hand will subconsciously be drawn to the left prong.
Yes.
Because that's where it feels like it should be.
Because that's how every other game controller in the history of the universe is laid out. Like, there's two handles, one hand goes on the left and one hand goes on the right. And that's how things work. And then, like, that's how it was even working before the N64, with, like, the little square D-pads for the NES and stuff. And then the N64 did that. I mean, it worked, kinda. I mean, I played Zelda with it perfectly fine. But, like, now that I'm a grown-up, I'm like, who made this decision? You know?
Yeah, well, you know what, though? It was weird-shaped. And it didn't make sense, but hey, you could plug in 4 of them in one console.
You could plug in 4 of them on a PS1? Sort of.
You had to buy a whole other thing to plug in 4.
Yes.
And it took Sony until the PlayStation 3 to figure out the ability of plugging in 4 controllers.
Look, that's just because Sony doesn't make baby party games, okay? They make, like, big kid cool games. That's the playground argument, anyways. They made cool video games for cool kids who didn't have any friends and just wanted to play, like, really ridiculously kind of janky platformers and JRPGs. Mostly JRPGs.
Mostly JRPGs and survival horror games and
stealth games. Lots of basically nothing has changed in like 20 years is what I'm saying, because Nintendo is like, we're gonna make party games, and Sony is like, we're gonna make, like, you know, video games, and then Microsoft is off, I don't know, writing on the walls in their own poo. And that's, you know, how it's always been. I guess that's how it's always going to be, because, like, really nothing has changed. Like, the games you play at your friends' houses are Nintendo games, and the games you play at home are, like, stuff you play on your computer, or on your PS4, or your PS1 in this case. Because, like, all of the games on the PS1, because, like, now I'm thinking about it, all of the games on the PS1 fucking ruled. Like, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, the first Metal Gear Solid, fucking Siphon Filter is a game that gets slept on really hard, but was actually pretty fucking dope for the time. And they're the ones making that Days Gone now, which I think, anyways. That PS4 zombie game.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
Yeah. They're making that now, but they made Siphon Filter back in the day, and Siphon Filter was radical for what it was. Which was like a cool third-person stealth game, but it wasn't like the weirdness of like Metal Gear Solid. It was more like a serious kind of down-to-earth like game, which meant as a kid I didn't understand a fucking thing that was going on, and I was always dying because I sucked at it. Which is how most stealth games go with children.
Yeah. Because your brain is not oriented for stealth at that point. Like, your brain is oriented for simple, straightforward platforming or, you know, fighting games. Like, it's not like hide from enemies. No, I can kill the enemy.
And then you die immediately and watch, rinse, repeat over and over again. Oh, and fighting games, yeah. Fucking PS1 had a lot of really dope ones too. So, like, yeah.
But the N64 and Smash Brothers.
Yeah, but that's all it had. Come on. It's the exact same as always. The more things change, the more things stay the same. Although I did remember playing Smash a lot as a kid, which is weird because now I'm like, Smash, whatever. But, like, I played the shit out of Smash at my friend's house as a kid, you know? It's
a fucking good game. Like, that's the thing, like, one of the notes I made about here, and I kind of think it's weird, is that, you know, it was in the early 90s, or the mid-90s when the PS1 came out, and, like, despite its huge success, like, its massive success, and, like, its continuing, enduring legacy, like, it is really weird to me that Sony never got a mascot character. Like, a consistent mascot character.
I guess that was kind of... that actually kind of takes me on to, like, tangent number 4, which was that they really didn't... They had... Well, alright, 4 and 5 was, one, they had this weird, polygon-headed guy in Japan who was supposed to show off, like, the cool graphics of the PS1, except, it was either Ken Kutaragi or Kaz Hirai who took one look at it and was like, this thing is an abomination. Kill it. It was one or the other. And then, like, the people at, like, Sony Entertainment of America were like, no, this thing is not, like, a fun mascot character. It's just horrifying. So they killed it pretty fast. And then they had the cat mascot in Japan, who still kind of persists because it's actually my icon on my PS4 now. But also, like, you know, Crash Bandicoot kind of became the de facto mascot for the PS1. And, like, my favorite thing in the universe ever is Ken Kutaragi, like the boss of Sony at the time. He fucking hated Crash. Like, Ken Kutaragi apparently had, like, a meeting with a Naughty Dog representative and was just like, I hate this character. And, like, when they released him in Japan, you know, they had to make him look, like, cutesier to make it
Yeah, they had to give him the big eyebrows. The same thing happened to Ratchet.
Yeah, it's really funny. They gave him, like the more shiny eyeballs and the big eyebrows to make him look more like the cutesy anime character guy. But no, Ken Kutaragi never stopped hating Crash Bandicoot, apparently. Which is, like, the funniest fucking thing to me. And even then, Crash was never, like a mascot character. And Spyro was, like, kind of a mascot character. But neither of those characters were, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Sanctioned mascots for Sony, you know?
Yeah, they weren't, like, the icon, like, the...
Mario.
The guy you'd see on the logo, or, you know, who appears in commercials or whatever, you know? It's just, but it's just, like, weird to me that, like, they never even, like, it's like they tried and then they kind of gave up on attempting it.
Yeah.
And as a result, we eventually ended up with PlayStation All-Star Battle.
Oh, boy.
Featuring such beloved characters like Bioshock Man and the bad Dante.
Oh, no. Oh, so, actually, the final boss of, again, I learned this when I was doing research for this episode, the final boss of PlayStation All-Stars is the polygon head guy that was like the canned mascot character.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah, which I think is actually pretty great. They were like, no, this thing is horrifying. Make it into a boss character. We should definitely make that the title card of the episode, is this fucking polygon head man.
Yeah.
I'll show it to you.
We'll make it a versus screen of Mario and the polygon head man.
Yeah, because he's horrifying. Like, he's not, like, fun and endearing at all. And it's like the most 90s thing I've ever seen. It looks like the kind of thing you'd see in an episode of Reboot that would give you nightmares for the next 2 months. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he looks like that. It's really bad. Like, it's really, really bad. But yeah, no mascots, no, like, cutesy advertising. It was all very edgy.
Oh, that was, because that was in the era where, like, we talked about that on our pre-internet gaming episode, where it's like, this was the era where it's like, your advertisements had to be very mean.
They were weird.
They were like, cruel and, like, insulting to you, where it's like, hey, you better buy a PlayStation or we'll kill your family.
Or you're a fucking nerd loser who's never gonna get any tail ever. But, like, Nintendo isn't even, like, safe from that, because...
No, they did that all the time. They had those Game Boy commercials, where it's like he's playing Game Boy while he's having sex with someone.
And this is you know, he's... statistically, if he's playing a Game Boy, that means he's playing Mario. You know? So he's, like, getting mushrooms and coins and shit while banging his girlfriend, and you're like, this is wholesome family fun. Sure. Like, who okayed these ads? Like, one of the ones I found that was the most impenetrable to me, like, I had to have the article explain it to me when I was looking at the picture for it. It's like an ad, like an early ad for the PS1 before it even came out, and it's like, so it says, you are NOTE, and the E is in red, right?
Right.
Do you get it?
You are not ready. Oh,
yeah.
That's dumb.
It's so dumb.
That's incomprehensible if you aren't, like...
I know!
If you're just breezing through the magazine, that's incomprehensible.
I saw it, and I was, like, staring at it on the internet. I'm like, what the fuck am I looking at? Your note? Because I guess I'm an idiot. I was just reading it as your note, like Death Note, but Death Note isn't out yet. What does this mean? Sony, explain your shitty ad to me. And I was just staring, and then I finally had to read the thing, and they're like, you're not ready. And I was just like, you know what, Sony, fuck you. You know? This sucks. This sucks, Sony. Like, don't do this.
It's it was a weird time to exist in and see these kinds of, like, these mean-spirited, incomprehensible ads that, like, didn't really sell you on the product because it's just like, this game is so brutal it'll cut your arms off. And it'll show, like, a guy with, like, frosted tips and he's, like, got his arms missing from Photoshop, and it's like, what?
Early Photoshop and frosted tips. Oh my god. And, like, I just want to know, like, what happened in the 90s? Was it, like, all, like, the lead in the water or something that made this happen? Like,
it was the Attitude Era.
The Attitude Era sucks, and it's all Sonic's fault. I blame Sonic 125% for, like, all of the 90s. For a massive portion of the 90s, actually. And, like, that's, like, tangent number 6 or 7 we're at now. But
this is, like, a very freeform episode.
It's fine. Listen,
It's
Sonic's fault. Because, like, so the Nintendo happened, and it was all family friendly, and Mario is completely inoffensive, and, you know, it's just, like, fun, good time, you know? You're jumping around with Luigi, you're collecting mushrooms, you're getting coins, he's like a mascot, it sells like gangbusters. And then here comes fucking Sega, and they're like, we've got this cool, edgy mascot guy, and it sold like crazy, right? Like, sold ridiculously well, and everybody loves Sonic, and everybody wanted to fuck Sonic, and you know, the world lost its mind then. Like, that's it. Like, video games lost their fucking minds as soon as Sonic happened, because they're like, man, the kids love the edgy hero, so let's make every single thing in video games allude to something edgy. It's all Sonic.
Sonic is the reason that Sony doesn't have a mascot, because Sonic is the reason Crash Bandicoot exists, and fucking Spyro, and, like, all of these other characters who are just trying to be Sonic again. But without being mascots, they're just, you know, because Crash is just, like, weird. I don't even really know, like, what Crash's, like, deal is. Like, does Crash have, like, brain damage? Is that what this is? He's just, like, he's like the Tasmanian devil, you know? He's just wacky and babbles, and he, you know, spins around, and he... You know, that's his deal, is his bag. Like, they actually had, like, because he's in Skylanders now, which is where Spyro went to die.
Oh, okay.
And he dragged Crash along with him.
No, well, Crash was dead for a while. That's fine.
Yeah, and but in the Skylanders cartoon, Crash talks with an Australian accent. And it's the most unsettling thing you could ever hear, because it's like, it's Crash. He's not supposed to talk.
I hate that you've told me this. Like, I could have gone my whole life without knowing that information. Without knowing that they gave Crash Bandicoot a voice. Because that's horrible. Like, no, don't. Crash doesn't talk. Crash says, whoa.
Yeah, he just goes, whoa! Because there's a whole meme about that exact thing.
Yeah, exactly, and it's kind of all I remember about Crash Bandicoot. That's not true. I actually played, now getting kind of back on topic, I played the living shit out of some Crash Bandicoot. So I don't understand. Maybe I have to just play, you know, they came out with the remake for the PS4, right? Mm-hmm. And everybody was like, it's like Dark Souls, which, you know, game reviewers are a plague that need to be purged, but they're like, it's super hard, it's like Dark Souls. But I mean, I played those games pretty well when I was a kid. Like, I don't remember having a hard time.
Like, I only got to play Crash when I was at someone's house, because I didn't own a PS1. Like, so, like, and even then, don't remember it being that particularly challenging.
No, I mean, it was like a 3D platformer. I mean, like, I remember hearing somebody complain about the levels in Warped where you have to ride on the tiger, but those were my favorite levels.
And even those weren't, like, they were challenging, but they weren't like really hard. They were
yeah.
They were all right. Like, they were enough of a challenge. I could beat them.
I mean, I never really had... I mean, if you wanted to, like, 100% them and get everything, that was pretty hard. But, like, I don't remember having a particularly, like, really super difficult time with the tiger levels in Warped, you know? Like, they went pretty smoothly for me. I went back and replayed Warped, 3 or 4 years ago, because I found it in a collection of old PS1 games at my brother's house, and I was like, ooh, Trey, let's sit down and play Warped. And we did. And it really wasn't that hard. I mean, I don't remember struggling with it. And then, like, these reviewers are like, Crash Bandicoot is like... And I wonder, did they... Now, I read somewhere that they changed the shape of the hitbox for...
There is some slight adjustment to, like, the hitbox and the jump speed and distance.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't think it would be enough to, like... who's playing Crash to the point that they can tell the minute details? The slight variation in jump speed, you know?
And the change in the hitbox. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to... I shouldn't judge these game reviewers for not being able to play Crash Bandicoot in 2017, but I will. I will. Absolutely. Game reviewers need to be purged because none of them know what the hell they were doing. If you're having a hard... Because, like, the whole point of Crash Bandicoot games was that, like, they're short, so they have to be hard to make them artificially longer. That's how video games have always worked.
Yeah,
since the beginning of time.
You know, and it is kind of funny, like, in comparing, like, Crash to the kind of stuff you would get on the N64, in that a lot of the platformers for the PS1, like Crash or Spyro, like, I guess not Spyro, but, like, Crash is, like, the mainstay one, and, like, the few that it did get, like Spyro or Croc or whatever, like, there's such a disparity between the quality of those games. Like, comparing Mario 64 to, like, Spyro, even.
Yeah, Spyro... I really enjoyed Spyro, but I was no good at it, and I think it was partly a design thing, because it was very strangely designed.
There's a lot of weird... Like, there's... I don't know how to put a word on it, but about the design of Spyro especially.
The camera was, like, pulled way too close in.
And it was controlling a four-legged creature in an open world platformer like that is a weird experience.
It was a strange video game. Yeah, like when I go back and play Spyro, again, it was years and years ago, but I went back and I replayed it. And I was kind of like, this is a weird video game. But that sums up a lot of, like, the early 3D video games. Just, like, in general. Like, what was that one fucking thing for the N64? It was, like, a shooter game, but it wasn't GoldenEye. It was, like, a third-person shooter.
You had a... Was it the one where you had a jetpack?
You had, like, it was like I had that blue-haired chick in it. It was, like, they were really ugly. You know what
God, I know it. It was by Rare, I think.
It was by Rare. Yeah. What was that? It was weird. That's all I remember about it. Was like remember playing it at a friend's house and being like, "This game is weird because it controlled really strangely." And
Jet Force Gemini.
Jet Force Gemini. Yeah, it felt like a game that had been made by aliens.
Yeah, it was weird. Like, there's that game. I remember that game being very, very strange. And it almost did kind of look like a PS. Like, one of the big things I love about this particular debate between N64 and PS1 is that how different both games looked.
Like, how different, like, and I don't mean, like, graphically, because all of those games back in the day, unless they were, like, the later, like, Final Fantasies and stuff, most of those games looked like dog shit. like, even to this, like, it's like Zelda has kind of aged okay, but then going back to even to like Mario 64, I don't think Mario 64 has aged that well. It's still like more playable than some of the games that came out back then, but it hasn't. You know what I mean?
Oh, I would disagree entirely. I think Mario
Really?
64 is timeless. Oh yeah.
I just think it's just, I don't know. It feels very weird and like open but empty at the same time. And maybe I need to go back and play it yet again now that I'm.
Well, when was the last time you played Mario 64?
I was like 15 or 16, so yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, because I got Odyssey, and then I didn't play it, but I looked up some stuff about 64,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like it was shocking how much it was like. Oh yeah, that's exactly how it. You know how you get that disparity of like the game is better than like it's worse than you remember it being.
Right. Yeah.
Like going back and looking at it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly how I remember it being, and I think 64 is timeless, and it hasn't aged at all. I think it still stands up to this day. You could re-release that like on a modern console, give it an HD port, and it would be fine.
They do that for the DS?
Yeah, for the DS, yeah, but that was like, in 2006 or so.
Okay, don't remind me of that. That's a really long time ago now. Oh my god, the DS is really old, isn't it?
It is super old.
No! Oh no.
But no, there's like this like visually there's a difference between like the overall style of an N64 game compared to a PS1 game. Like it's something in the texture quality or like the way the models are designed.
It's something in like the color palette choices too, and I almost wonder. Even like Spyro, which is a very colorful game, has a different kind of color quality than like Mario 64 or Zelda, or like Smash Brothers, and I can't really articulate what that is. You know what I mean? But when I think about like old N64 games and old PS1 games, the color quality is different. And I wonder if it was like a rendering thing that the PS1 had.
There's a lot more like. I think the texture resolution was higher in the PS1, but like the N64s were like cleaner almost.
Yeah, I feel that.
Because like I'm looking at screenshots now because I haven't pulled up. I'm looking at screenshots of Jet Force Gemini, and like comparing those to like something like Silent Hill or Metal Gear Solid. Like there's you can tell immediately what console these games were on.
Right. Yeah. And I don't really know how to articulate the difference in visuals. Like, it almost feels like the models, like the kind of models that were being made for the PS1 were different than the models being made for the N64. Like, my memory is that the models in the N64 were really blocky, and the models for the PS1, I mean, they're not technically pixels because obviously it was a 3D console. It wasn't pixels. But when I say pixelated, I think of like Squall's shitty face in Final Fantasy VIII. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's the difference, was that like the PS1 was trying to come up with like a facsimile of detail, while the N64 didn't really care about detail so much as it was making sure things were very visually distinct.
Yeah, it was more of a focus, like, and it's kind of the same thing that happened with the GameCube and the PS2 era, where like we had a shift towards more realism and making models as detailed as possible compared to making them aesthetically pleasing.
Right.
And like making sure that visual cues were noticeable and elements were detectable on the screen.
Yeah. And I think that's what kind of differentiates the two design philosophies of like a PS1 game versus an N64 game, is the what they were trying to accomplish, because the games that were coming out on the PS1 were obviously trying to go for more of a cinematic feel. Never mind the fact that they were on a PS1 and they didn't really have still didn't have the space for cinematics.
Yeah, they did not have the ability or time or space
or money or anything, but they still tried. Damn it! Like you were saying about Silent Hill, it's mind-boggling to the fact that Silent Hill had voice acting. You know?
Yeah, that's one of the big things about this is that there's this weird thing where games, whether or not they actually had voice acting in them, was also a big part of this generation.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you get away with just random grunting and whatever, or did you actually get people in a studio to record lines?
Poorly, but they recorded lines. Because boy, early video game voice acting is super rough. And it was that weird time in video games where you could totally get away with not having any voice acting. There's no voice acting in any of the Final Fantasies.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until years later. I mean, I still remember the back of Final Fantasy X's box saying everything is voice acted, and it was a big deal. And so it was just touch and go, because there's Silent Hill, it had voice acting, at least a little. And then there was other stuff that didn't have it at all. There was some that had sporadic voice acting, like Metal Gear Solid. There was stuff that had really good voice acting, if you played Soul Reaver, the quality of voice acting in Soul Reaver is really weird because they got Tony Jay to play the Elder God. So Claude Frollo is the Elder God. And so, he sounds amazing, and you're wow, the voice acting in this game is really good. And then there were other games like Grandia, which is a JRPG for the PS1 that did have voice acting before its time. It was, you play it and you're wow, this game has voice acting. Wow, this voice acting sucks dick. It's really, really corny and bad, even though Grandia itself is really, really good. And so it's just and then the N64 is over there just chilling with none. I can't think of a single N64 game that had voice acting.
Wrong. Star Fox 64 had full voice acting.
Oh, that's right. How could I forget that? Oh man.
Yeah.
That's because Slippy. Everybody hates Slippy.
It was from minute 1 of that game is constant chatter in your radio.
I forgot. Oh man, I am getting old. I forgot all about
and
Star Fox.
Every
64.
single line is voiced. Every single line is recorded, and it's great. And no one ever talks about that.
I forgot. Man, that was pretty good. Star Fox was pretty good.
Star Fox 64 is one of the best games to ever come out on anything.
Yeah, it's pretty, and it's kind of the only good Star Fox game that's come out in the last 20 years.
Oh yeah, it is the only Star Fox 64, only Star Fox game that's actually good, except for the 3DS remake.
And that's just a remake of Star Fox 64. So, yeah.
Nothing else has ever captured the quality of Star Fox 64.
Because Nintendo insists on adding shit into Star Fox games that isn't flying a goddamn plane. You know? You don't need anything else in a Star Fox game. Star Fox Adventure, this is tangent number 8. But you don't need to walk around in a Star Fox game, you know?
You don't need on-foot segments. You don't need, chicken walker segments. You put me in the air wing. Mm-hmm. Let me go on a rails shooter. That's all I need. That's all I need.
That's all anybody wants from a Star Fox game. Give us 20 levels of that and just let us fly around and shoot shit. Why are you making me walk around on foot, Star Fox Adventure? Why is there a sexy furry lady in your game, Star Fox Adventure? Are you trying to pander to the Sonic crowd, Star Fox Adventure? It kind of worked, and I hate you for it.
Star Fox Adventure is a pretty good Zelda game.
No, it's not. It sucks. Oh, Star Fox. What happened to you?
Okay, but the N64 is it's weird because like there are very few other things that appeal to the Nintendo philosophy of like fun than the N64, because it still used cartridges, and the way it took advantage of using cartridges is that they were in different colors sometimes.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with a disc, and that's cool, and that's one of the reasons I actually like cartridges more.
But cartridges were expensive, and that's why there were no video games on the N64. Like, in comparison to, like, the PS1, was because Nintendo had a monopoly on cartridge production. Cartridges were super expensive to make, and, like, a video game for the N64 was, like, $20 more than a game for the PS1 at some points. That was, like, the downside of them. And I mean, like, we're kind of going back to cartridges, because, yeah, they definitely load faster than a disc these days. And they've always loaded faster than a disc. The load times on the N64 were always better.
There were none. It was just, here it is, your game is good.
Your game is here. It's on a cartridge. It loads up just fine. But
you don't even have to go through a PlayStation startup menu. It's just you press the button and there it is.
Oh man, here's game. Holy shit, you know? But like, that's kind of always been, like, it's always kind of been the problem, really, with like Nintendo. And this isn't like me. This isn't supposed to be like an episode of me shitting on Nintendo, because I did like the N64. But that's kind of what really hurt the system's sales, was that the games were expensive, and they were kind of shitty to develop for. And, you know, Nintendo had a lock on the cartridge production market, so you couldn't even have, like, third-party cartridge producers. So it drove the price up, which is kind of how Nintendo has always done things, which is kind of shitty. To just kind of have, like, this lock on making games for your system. So I don't know. But, you know, like, I think that's probably what contributed to the N64's just okay sales. You know? Like, and why the PS1 just destroyed it. Because it was cheap to produce discs. I mean, discs were cheap as shit to make, you know?
Yeah, the games were a lot cheaper on the PS1 for sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I found out, I was like, when I was doing research for this episode, you know how the discs were black for a PS1?
What? Oh, yeah.
Like, you know, like, you remember the discs of the PS1? They were black? Yeah, they didn't
it
actually
just looked
serve
cool.
any purpose. It just looked cool. So they just wanted to have black discs for the PS1 because it looked cool. And I'm like, that's cool. That's fine. You do you. And then the blue discs for the PS1 sucked. Whoops. Whoopsie. I had a blue disc. I had a blue disc copy of Ico, and it played like shit. Yeah. But that's another story.
But, like, it's... But, I don't know, one of the things I think about is, like, the reason why the N64 is more ubiquitous and, like, more well-known than the PS1, and, like, even though, like, it sold 70 million less, I think the reason is because, like, when you went to a friend's house, you played N64. Like, you know, exactly, you might have known someone who had a PS1, but, like, you didn't play it at their house. You played Mario Party, you played Mario Kart, you played GoldenEye, you played Perfect Dark, you played Smash Brothers.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because all of those games were made for people playing them together, and that's kind of, like, always been Nintendo's design philosophy pretty much ever since the N64, really. Like the SNES, like the NES and the SNES.
Well, the NES is like
fun.
The Super Mario Brothers had a 2-player mode, which is like you don't see like any adventure games, these like action games or like story-driven games these days with a 2-player mode. And that's because they've gotten bigger, but like, you know, you don't get that anymore.
Right, yeah. So it's kind of always been their philosophy, and it's just that the N64 really cranked it up.
Yeah, it got the market on that, because it had 4 controllers right out the gate. You could just plug in 4 controllers at any time.
Yeah. And And yeah, I think that's what it is that you could just, even if you didn't own an N64, you went over to your friend's house and that was what you did for 6 hours, is just
you played GoldenEye or Mario Kart until you were dead.
Oh, and by the way,
it has
aged like shit. Like, GoldenEye, turns out GoldenEye was never good. Because I went to a bar that had GoldenEye at it, like, 6 months ago, and me and some friends tried to play it, and we were like,
it turns out that once you get used to decent frame rate and you go back to play GoldenEye, you're like, oh no!
It turns out, a first-person shooter without a second analog stick is the worst goddamn idea in the universe. Who knew? It's really bad. Like, it's aged like trash. Whereas, like, like Zelda and Mario have aged very well. No, not GoldenEye. GoldenEye sucks. Yeah, it's a shame. But GoldenEye, like, is legitimately just not fun to play. And I felt really bad when I was at this bar playing this with my friends, and we're all sitting there, and we're like, this sucks.
Because you don't want it to suck, because it's GoldenEye, and, like, I probably sank, like, 400 hours into GoldenEye.
Just playing GoldenEye with your friends, because it was, like, the game you sat around and got angry at your friends with, right? You know, like, you played it for hours.
We would come up with custom match ideas, and, like, organize our own rules and stuff. It was, you have very fond memories of it, and you don't want it to be bad, but then you play it, and you're like, oh no, it's bad! It's really, really bad! It really hasn't aged well. Also, I remember Smash Brothers looking better, and then that was another game that was at that bar. And those they're super low poly. They're like the first really Smash Brothers production values are trash compared to what Melee looked like, and then moving on to Brawl and to for Wii U. Like, it's the gap between Smash Brothers and Melee is so staggering.
It's huge. It's like an ocean of quality. Like, the legs between... It's ridiculous. Like... Because that was another... It's, time softens all memories. And I didn't remember Smash Brothers looking like that until I was, playing it at 28, going like, oh... This is like Samus is really just kind of like an orange and red.
Oh, her poly count is really probably like in the double digits. Like, you can do the fighting polygon team, and you can kind of get a better look at like what they're all made of, and it's not high.
It's not high. No, it's not good. And it's fine, because, at the time, it was fine, because you really only needed, like, a representation, because, one, the camera does pull back kind of far, and two, like, everything that's going on so fast, you didn't want them to be really detailed, you just wanted to be able to see them, right? So, like, it's fine. It's fine. This is fine. It's fine. But it also looks kind of rough. But... Again, it was just one of those games you could just play for my god, the amount of hours we sunk into Smash Brothers is, obscene. Yeah, obscene.
All night. Like, all night. You would play, I would go to my friend's house until the wee hours of the morning. We would just play Smash Brothers, or we would play GoldenEye, or we would play, we would actually play Army Men, Sarge's Heroes. Which is a game that probably we should not have played that much, because it was not good.
That was a bad third-party video game. That was a bad movie. Have you?
You're talking about Small Soldiers, not Army Men.
Yes. Whatever. It's the same thing in my brain. And it had a video game too. That's what I'm remembering. It had PS1 video game. It sucked. Mm-hmm. Just, let you know. Like, it sucked. And, like, speaking of like the Army Men franchise, because now I'm remembering it, it's weird how many
there were a
games
bunch.
there were. Right? Like, it's weird that there were a lot of video games about killing Army Men toys. I'm not crazy, right?
Yeah,
like, that's a weird thing.
It was the little plastic,
right?
yeah, the little plastic green men.
Yeah. Yeah, it's strange how many there were, and I'm like, what? Early video games were weird. Early video games were weird when you start thinking about them for more than, like, 5 minutes. Because you had, like, Army Men, and, again, Jet Force Gemini, to this day, feels like a game that wasn't actually made by people. Like, I don't know. Like, I know that it's Rare, and they made Banjo and Kazooie, which is a pretty good game. But even then, like, I don't know. And then, like, all the old PS1...
there was that big rush for PS1 of, we need to get out our mascot game, and we need to beat Sonic, and we need to beat Mario, and they tried so many times.
They did. They wanted to be the next Crash Bandicoot. They wanted to, make that sweet, sweet Naughty Dog.
So we had Tomba, we had Croc,
and
we had... oh my
Gex.
God, Gex!
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
there was Gex. Although I feel like Gex might have come before Crash, but I could be totally am I crazy, or was there a Gex game for the SNES?
Let me see. Because I remember playing Gex, nope, Gex was PlayStation. It was originally released for the Panasonic 3DO. And then it came out for PlayStation, Sega Saturn.
Nice.
And it says right here in this page, he was intended as a competitor to rival the likes of video game mascots like Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog. No.
Mm-hmm. No.
Bubsy and
Bubsy,
Jersey Devil. Oh, you didn't see Jersey Devil? No. If you had a PlayStation
horrible?
demo disc, you saw Jersey Devil.
Hold on, Jersey Devil PS1.
You have seen Jersey Devil.
Because, I don't know this one at all. I'm, looking at it, and I do not recognize this fucking awful thing. Oh God, this is hideous. This is not great. See, this is what I mean. Oh, Medieval Rule.
Yes,
where
Medieval.
You played as, a skeleton guy. Medieval was radical. It was another... it wasn't like a platformer the way the others were.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like a... I guess it was technically a platformer, but it was more like an adventure game than a platformer. I don't know. But it was also weird. Like most of the games that came out. Boy, were video game people having a hard time with 3D
what's really weird is, I think I've thought about, the way I can describe the difference between, the PS1 platformers and the N64 platformers, comparing, Spyro or Crash or anything to Mario and Banjo-Kazooie. It's that, the PS1 platformers felt really, floaty and...
Yeah, that's the exact word.
Bouncy, but not in, a way that, you would expect a cartoon character to be. But, in a way that, these character models have absolutely no weight to them. And... Yeah,
they don't seem to, actually exist in any kind of space. They're just kind of, floating around is a good way to put it. Yeah. And that was just, again, these were just developers going, oh god, we need to make a 3D game, and we've never done it before.
We don't have an analog stick, how do we do this?
How do you make a video game without
How
an
do you
analog
make a
stick?
3D platform without an Crash got away with it because Crash was all hallways. It was all just, you walk down a hallway, so it's fine. But then you get into,
Yeah, it was fine. It worked perfectly.
You get into, Spyro or stuff, and it's you need an analog stick for that.
Yeah, Yeah, like now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, wow, how did some of these games even work? Because some of these games obviously came out after the analog stick version of the controller came out, but some of them didn't. Like, I think Metal Gear Solid came out after the analog stick.
Because,
I want to say
because you couldn't walk in that game.
Oh,
because you could only run.
Right.
You couldn't tiptoe at all.
Oh, that's so bad.
It was...
Oh my god.
Well, because then the only way around it was you had to give all your platformers tank controls. Mm-hmm. And those don't work very well in a platformer.
No. They really don't work well anywhere. Like, even in, like, Resident Evil, and I hate taking controls. Like, I know there are some people who swear by them. I fucking hate taking controls. I would
rather that you make your game's maneuverability more difficult via other means, like putting you in cramped hallways or something like that, instead of just limiting my ability to move my character in a direction.
Right. It works, like, kind of okay for Silent Hill, because Silent Hill did some, like, fun things with camera angles, and, like, Resident Evil is Resident Evil, but even then, like, it doesn't make it really fun to go back and replay. I mean, you manage, and it, you know, like, Silent Hill isn't really supposed to be, like, finger quotes, fun. It's supposed to be, like, scary, you know? You're supposed to feel, like, helpless and stuff. Whatever. And boy, a lot of video games came out on PS1.
Well, I mean, I wanted to check, and I didn't actually get to... I wanted to check the actual number of games that came out for both consoles.
Oh, that's,
so I'm gonna look up the N64 right now, and I'm gonna see...
Let me see, PS1...
Okay.
Or, how would I even Google that? Number of...
I just did list of games, and then the console. The N64 had 388 games.
Oh my god. No, that can't be right. As of September 30th, 2007, 7,978 times. That can't be it. No. No. Hold on. No. Hold on.
No, okay, why did you... The Wikipedia page is saying 2,513.
Okay. That's still a lot.
And it says there are currently 2,513 games in this list. The final licensed PlayStation game coming released in Japan, not counting re-releases, was Black Matrix 00 in 2004.
Wow.
The final licensed game
the 7,000 number was for PlayStation as, like, a brand. Okay.
Oh, okay. That would make more sense then.
That makes way more sense. But still, over 2,000 titles just for the PS1.
And the last game in North America, by the way, was FIFA Football 2005.
Wow.
They put out a FIFA game in 2005, which is, like, near the end of the PlayStation 2's life cycle.
You know what? I remember hearing about that. I remember reading that somewhere, like, on the internet even, back, you know, like, when the internet was, like a teenager. And I was just like, wow, they're still making, like, a PS1 game. But no, they put out, like, sports games? They put out sports games for the PS1 for, like, 1 billion years. Because, you know, people still buy it. You're not gonna upgrade a system just to buy the new Madden. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so, that is a huge disparity. How many did you say for the N64? Like, 200 or something?
388.
Wow. That is a huge
let me see. Does it actually
difference.
list when the last one was? Also, I was completely wrong. It's that the 2005 is not near the end of the PlayStation 2's life cycle. That would be like 2007 or so. Whenever Persona 4 came out.
But I mean, like, Persona 4 was the very ass end of the PS4, or the PS4 fucking shit, the other one. The PS2's life cycle. So yeah, like 2005 was the beginning of the end for the PS2 or the PS1. You know what I mean? Or the PS2.
Yeah. The last game to be published for the system was the North America locked Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 came out on the N64.
Wow, holy shit.
That's shocking to me because I own the GameCube version of 3.
Oh wow! Shut up. Oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think there would have been like a game like okay, this is a weird thing to say, but it feels weird to me that a game could be on like for a game that was to be on the N64 and the GameCube feels weirder than a game being on both the PS1 and the PS2. Does that make sense?
No, I understand that because like it feels like there is a huge, like a wider disparity between the N64 and the GameCube than the PS1 and PS2. And I don't know if that's just because of branding reasons or like because the PS2 kind of just looked and felt more like a visual, like an upgrade of the PS1. It had the same controller scheme. It had, the same name.
Yeah.
Whereas the GameCube and the N64 feel like completely different products.
Yeah, like two totally different beasts with with specs that would be so different that you couldn't do that. But no, it's fine, apparently. That's so weird to me. And the GameCube still had Nintendo's fucking policy of weird ass. Can you believe it took Nintendo until the Wii to just put games on a fucking disc?
Yeah, because the GameCube had those little micro discs.
Yeah, those little baby discs that sucked. It took them until the
Well, the funny thing is the Wii
generation.
The Wii is the only one that actually just uses straight up plain discs. Mm-hmm. Because the Wii U has those fun, smooth edges around the discs.
Huh? No, I've never.
And
actually,
I don't know if
with
they're
a Wii U game.
Oh yeah, if you ever get a chance to if you find a Wii U game at a GameStop or something, run your finger around the edge of the disc, and you will not be disappointed.
So it's perfectly smooth.
Yeah, it's rounded, and it's it's weirdly satisfying. To just be oh, it's smooth.
See, this is tangent number 12. But boy, that's an indicator of the Wii U's abysmal sales. I've literally never even physically touched a Wii U game. I've never actually physically put my hands on a Wii U disc in my entire life. Yeah. And I play video games semi-regularly. I don't know if you've noticed. But no, I've never even touched one. And so I had no idea that it had a weird smooth edge disc thing going on.
It's so weird, and it's but once you do it, once you actually feel it, you're oh, this is really nice. It's almost like listening to rain. It's the tactile feeling of listening to a calming rainstorm outside your window.
Hilarious. Oh man.
One of those those memes where it's satisfying things putting your hand in the grain.
Yeah.
Or seeing ice cubes perfectly aligned.
Right.
Yeah, one of those needs to be running your finger along the edge of a Wii U disc.
It's the only good thing about the Wii U. Wah, wah, wah.
But no, it's no, there's still a lot of I don't know, the N64 is just it's such a weird console. With weird controller, it still used cartridges. Mm-hmm. I don't think anything exemplifies more Nintendo's oddball nature than the N64. Not even the Wii or even the Wii U or the Switch. It's because by the time the N64, the time that era was around, the N64, Saturn, and PS1, it was pretty clear, the PS1 predates the N64.
Right.
It's a year earlier, and it's by that point, and the Saturn as well, it's discs were the thing.
Well, yeah, of course,
and
yeah.
even if you look at let me just pull it up. The Saturn controller, even the ideal design of a controller was pretty set,
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah,
then,
the Saturn had a pretty decent looking little controller. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it's And then it's, here's the N64 with its cartridges and its three-pronged controller. Whoops. And it was also weird, like, there were not a lot of third-party crossover between the N64 and the PS1. But, like...
Right.
But even, like, the GameCube had more of that. The GameCube, PS2, and Xbox era had tons of, like, multi-port games. Like, you could pick up a version of this game in any of those three. And it's like, the N64 had some, but, like, there was really not a lot.
And I think it was because of, like, weird technical limitations and the pain in the ass of putting games on a cartridge, and a lot of little things like that that made it hard to make video games for the N64 just in general, because again, as we've learned, the PS1 had almost 3,000 games, and the N64 had significantly less.
It didn't even break 1,000 games.
Yeah, and so, that's such a strange... The PS1 was just easy to make video games for, and had a huge install base, and, the discs were easy to, sell. They were cheap. They, everybody had them, and so you had a good customer base, and a pretty... I wouldn't say, like, super powerful, obviously, little console, but, it had such a huge variety of video games, and this isn't a tangent, this is related to the conversation, but, it killed do you know the story of how the Saturn died?
I don't actually know the exact story of how the Saturn died.
Well, the story that kind of sealed the Saturn's fate is a really simple one. And Sony did it again to the Xbox One. So they've done it before. But in 1995, when the Saturn and the PS1 were both announced, I think it was like E3 1995 or something like that. I'm probably wrong about that year, but I'm mostly right. The Saturn had already announced their price, and it was like $399 or something like that, I think. And Sony had their, which was a lot of money, especially back in 1994 or 95, whatever. And Sony had their press conference to announce the PlayStation 1, and Kaz Hirai walked out on stage, and he just leaned into the mic and said, $299, and walked away.
And that's all you need, and that's
all you need. That's literally all it took. And after that, it was just like the PlayStation just dominated. And like you said, 100 million units sold is insane. That is just a tremendously massive number. And that's it. That's all it took. And they did it, like I said, they did it again to the Xbox One. They fucked up with the 3.
Yeah, $599.
Whoopsie, you fucked up. But then the PS4 happened, and they undercut the Xbox One by $100. And so, that's their signature move, I guess. How to kill a competitor system. Undercut them by $100.
Yeah.
And yeah, the poor Sega Saturn never really stood a chance after that, especially because it was just kind of like a garbage console with like garbage video games on it.
It was a very like lesser known like console.
Yeah, and it really didn't have a lot going for it.
Easily forgettable, even more so than like the Dreamcast was.
Yeah, because like the Dreamcast at least had like the weirdness factor going for it, because it had like really strange games like Shenmue and stuff like that, and had like fun stuff like Power Stone. But the Saturn had nothing.
I could talk forever, and it's the wrong generation, because there was the 6th generation was the Dreamcast, but like, oh fuck, the Dreamcast got a bad rap, and I feel so bad for the Dreamcast.
The Dreamcast just got a bad rap because it was the first 6th generation game system, but like, like it came out before the PS2.
It was in between the PS2 and the PS1.
It was kind of like the Wii U. You know what I mean? Where it
got released at a very awkward time.
it was like it came out at a point where people weren't exactly ready to already buy a new console because they still had their PS1 and they had plenty to play on that, and the PS2 was kind of like a blip on the horizon, and people were kind of gearing up for that. And then here comes the Dreamcast, and it's like nobody's really wanting to spend their money on that system at that time. Like, it just kind of happened. The universe coalesced, and the Dreamcast was just not... It was just... The release window was poorly planned. And it's weird, because you're right, it is technically a 6th generation console, like the PS2 and the Xbox, but it doesn't feel like it. You know, it feels like a late 5th generation
It feels like
console.
a 5.5 generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it.
And it's like, I feel so bad for it because it tried so hard, and it had online play.
Yes,
and
you
it
could
had
play
those,
Phantasy Star Online.
It had those VMUs that were like micro games into themselves, and it had good Sonic, and it had these weird niche titles that were like really interesting.
It's Super Monkey Ball came out. Didn't it come out on the Dreamcast first, or am I going crazy?
No, that was a GameCube game.
Was it? Oh man,
yeah.
Boy, I get my trivia mixed up sometimes.
But I mean, it could have very well come out on the Dreamcast.
It looks like a Dreamcast game, right? Like,
yeah.
Again, talking about like console game aesthetics. Like, the Dreamcast games always strike me as these weird fever dreams. Like, especially stuff like Shenmue, which is just... Shenmue is a weird game. Did you play it?
I did not play Shenmue.
Oh, Shenmue, or Shenmue, I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it. But Shenmue is a weird game. Like... It's like
the precursor to the Yakuza series.
It's like the precursor to the Yakuza and to, like, Grand Theft Auto 3, because it's a weird pseudo-open world, kind of like Persona-ish, where you're, like, in a town and there's people and they've got schedules, and it was just a strange. You're trying to find out who killed your dad, and you know, it's set in Hong Kong or something like that, and it's just odd, you know? And, like... It was so... And then there was, like, a sequel, and I never played the sequel. And 3 is never coming out. Ever.
It's never coming out.
Sorry. Just like Kingdom Hearts 3 and the Final Fantasy VII Remake. But yeah. That's another tangent. Shit. But the Dreamcast got shafted is the point I'm trying to make, and you're trying to make. And it could have been something, but it happened at the wrong time. And while Sony had basically, like, total dominance of the video game conversation, because, like, the PS1 was just... I mean, when you think about the scope of games that came out on the PS1, it's actually a little mind-boggling, like, how many different kinds of games were on the PS1. Because, I mean, there were shooters, there was, like, platformers, there was a ton of JRPGs.
There's a massive amount of JRPGs.
I mean, and even like, not even stuff that is, like, the well-known stuff. Like, yeah, Final Fantasy, sure, but also, the Tales games. There was the Lunar series. There was the re-release of Chrono Trigger that was garbage. There was Chrono Cross. There was the Wild Arms games. There was Suikoden. And then there was, like...
Xenogears.
There was Xenogears. There was Grandia. There were tons and tons. And even, like, weird things. Jade Cocoon is, like, a strange, shitty Pokemon ripoff that had, like, a cool concept, but not a great execution. And all
Persona.
sorts of... Persona happened, and had Hitler in it, and was censored in the United States because of it. And I mean, there's probably more that I'm forgetting right now, but that is a huge number of JRPG properties on one system that, like, were all pretty decent. Like, Wild Arms 2 and 3 are really good, and you know, Suikoden 2 is a weird hidden classic that, if you've never played, is actually now available for direct download, and even though I hate the idea of giving Konami money, you should go play it, because there's a lot in that game. for being a pixel-based, top-down, like, Final Fantasy stick. Like, it looks like Final Fantasy VI. Like, pixel JRPG, because there's tons of recruitable characters. I mean, again, 108 recruitable characters has always been the ethos of the Suikoden games. I mean, just all sorts of stuff. And I mean, yeah, Final Fantasy VII is what made it happen, of course, because that ignited a niche market. And yeah, the PlayStation was the birth of the JRPG subgenre. I mean, there were games before that on other consoles, but that's where it actually found like a home, and you could just play them forever. There were tons of them. And that's
you could count on on them being there.
Yeah, I mean, just off of those series I listed alone, if you only wanted to play, like, PS1 JRPGs, you could reasonably keep yourself busy for the next 2 years. Which is insane. I mean, like, because those are 50, 60-hour games, and it's more than just, like, a small handful. Like, there's not, like, comparing it to the PS4 right now, how many big JRPGs are there? There's really not that many compared to how many there were and there weren't that many on the PS3 either. It kind of reached ahead on the PS2, but it started on the PS1, and if you just wanted to play PS1 JRPGs, and that was the only thing you wanted to play, you could keep yourself busy for a really, really long time. That's amazing to me. For like a little underpowered system that could only do so much, there was, I mean, so much of video games starts at the PS1.
Well, video games start at the PS1. That's the real birthplace of video games. Final Fantasy starts at 7.
Final Fantasy starts at 7. Yeah, totally.
Fallout starts at 3.
Yeah, of course. But no, like, you know what I mean?
No, I do. Like, that. It was JRPG Central on the PS1.
And not just JRPGs, but like, I mean, that was such a starting point, because suddenly it went from being, like, video games went from being, like, they were big after the crash, they came back, but then the PS1, I feel like, kind of cemented the fact that they were never going to go away. You know what I mean? Like, the crazy sales of the PS1 made it go from being like a hobby that only a few people did, and it was like a hobby genre, and not every played video games. It became
more mainstream. Like, it opened up the mainstream for anyone. Because, it had 2,500 games. Like, you could find something you would enjoy.
Exactly. And so video games came back after the crash in 84, and they had a place, and they had their own little side market of people who really loved them. And then the PS1 happens, and it's like, oh, anybody can play video games and enjoy them, and that's what turned it into, like, an actual piece of entertainment media, the way, like, movies and TV are now. It went from being, like, a little side thing to being part of the cultural conversation, you know?
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is that, like, fucking every movie, every book, every TV show got a PS1 game.
Yeah, that's why it has so many fucking games on it.
How many? I don't know how many people, different families, owned a fucking Bug's Life on PS1.
Or, like, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, game?
Straight up, one of my biggest memories of the PS1, like, the most prominent memories, is playing a fucking Bug's Life. Like, everyone I knew owned that game.
Or, no, the one that everybody I knew was Toy Story.
Yes, the Toy Story game, yes.
The Toy Story, like, I didn't play the Bug's Life one, but everybody I knew had Toy Story for the PS1, which is a weird thing. And yeah, like, movie tie-ins were a thing for a little while, weren't they?
Oh, that era, the N64 PS1 era was like, GoldenEye! One of the most popular games on the N64 was a fucking port, or was a fucking movie tie-in.
Yeah, it was a licensed movie tie-in. And in retrospect, that's probably why GoldenEye kind of sucks now that you think about it. Because, like, most movie tie-in games kind of suck.
But I mean, like, it's funny to think about, like, the reason GoldenEye is popular had absolutely nothing to do with James Bond at all.
No,
That's
not
like
at all. It was because it was
my
a rad
favorite
party
part about
game.
that is that, like, the reason this game is popular has... Because it's kind of funny because, like, you know, because you play GoldenEye, you get all those characters, right?
Right.
You know, you do the code, you get a bunch of... You can play as the guards and the whatever. Mm-hmm. No one I knew actually played as James Bond in multiplayer. We always played as, like, Soviet guard or, like... one of the scientists or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, nobody wanted to play as James Bond. You wanted to play as just some rando. Like, like, yeah. You know, you say good. That's the funny thing is when I say, like, GoldenEye, you almost don't even think of the James Bond movie. You know what I mean?
No, it's, I don't think it's controversial or, like, you know, or contending to say that GoldenEye 64 has usurped GoldenEye the movie as, like, what you think of when you hear that name.
Yeah, exactly. Like, GoldenEye 64, like, the movie didn't have nearly the amount of, like, crazy impact that the game did. The game was, like the beginning of the party shooter, you know?
You know, that specifically the multiplayer of the game included.
Yeah.
Because no one cares about the actual, like, primary campaign of it.
Yeah, I don't really even remember anybody I know playing the campaign. Because everybody...
played the campaign to unlock the stuff for multiplayer.
But even then, like, what did everybody you know have? It was a piece of paper with all of the GoldenEye cheat codes.
Yeah.
To just unlock all that shit without having to do the work, right? Like, everybody had a piece of notebook paper where you just, like, it was written down because you saw it in a book somewhere. And you put that in so you don't have to actually do the work of playing GoldenEye to play the multiplayer completely unlocked, you know?
Yeah, it's so funny that, like, we talk a lot about how you know, licensed games are always, like, are primarily bad, and, like, this one sold the N64.
Right. It was so prominent that a bar I went to had it set up for people to play, and it's just a licensed movie tie-in.
And what's really interesting about GoldenEye specifically, and this will eventually lead into, like, what I want to do for the rest of the episode for this one, to kind of, like, wind down. But, like, you know, it's the we talked about it in the pre-internet area where you didn't have the ability to openly discuss things on a national level, right? Mm-hmm. Which means everyone just kind of, like, GoldenEye 64 got popular not because of hype, not because of magazine, like, articles or, you know, forum posts or whatever. It got popular because it was good.
Yeah, it got popular because it was good and it had legs.
Everyone independently was like, holy shit, this game's awesome.
Yeah, it was like the ideal hang out with your friends and play video games game, you know? Like, and that's what sold it, because it was just a good sit around and play it video game. Like, it didn't have any hype, it didn't have a lot of advertisement, it was just, this is a good-ass game to sit around and play with your friends, and everybody realized it, and that's why everybody bought it, you know?
Yeah.
Which is
it's
interesting.
It's cool, yeah. And so, to kind of, like, wind down from like, the actual discussion points of... Because it's pretty clear that, like, financially and systematically, the PS1 is, like... On paper, it's the better console.
Yeah.
Like, for sure. Like, budget-wise and number of games and sales, like, yeah, that one won. It won this round. Basically. This generation. But... Just for fun...
Oh, boy.
I want to... just kind of gush about, we'll say, your 3 favorite games for the PS1.
Ooh. Oh, you should have given me heads up. My 3 favorite games from the PS1 era.
Or just the 3 that are, like, most prominent, like, to you right now that kind of stand out.
Oh god, that's easy. If that's the case, it's Final Fantasy VII, Chrono Cross, and I don't want to list another JRPG because immediately what comes to mind is Lunar 2, but I've already got 2 on my list right now. So let's say Crash Bandicoot Warped. If we're going to talk about games that I put the amount of, like, the crazy amount of time I put into, those 3 are probably the ones that I just consistently go back to, and just constantly played as a kid, especially Chrono Cross. Like, if I had to gush about one game on the and I mean, that's a weird choice because a lot of Chrono Trigger fans hate Chrono Cross, and fuck you, I'll fight every single one of you in a parking lot. Because people are very divided on Chrono Cross, but I will stand by Chrono Cross until I am dead. Because Chrono Cross is amazing. Chrono Cross has the best soundtrack. Chrono Cross is fucking beautiful, has, like, a cool, kind of incomprehensible plot, and, like, a weird universe traveling mechanic instead of a time traveling mechanic, and is awesome. Everything about Chrono Cross is fucking awesome, okay? Like, the battle system is this weird one-use only spells thing, and it feels like this strange fever dream world, and you know, knowing about Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross doesn't really fit anywhere in that world. Like, there's nowhere in, like, the Chrono Trigger world where the archipelago that Chrono Cross takes place in should realistically exist. At least I think. It's been a while. But every single part of Chrono Cross is just, like, a gift to the eyes. It was, to this day, it is still one of my favorite, like, one of my favorite games to just look at. It is so pretty. Those pre-rendered backgrounds are like nothing I've ever seen, and the world itself feels like something different, and there's so much, like, just the set pieces are unique, and the world built around it is so strange, because it's like, you can tell, and I don't know if this is true, but I'm just going to theorize that, you know, they saw Chrono Cross and they built they took a lot of those ideas in Chrono Cross and springboarded off of them for Final Fantasy X with this whole, like, island culture, JRPG world of bright, colorful things. And I don't know, I could gush for a very, very long time about my feelings toward Chrono Cross, because it is really unique in the JRPG landscape, and I probably think I like it more than Chrono Trigger.
Yeah. You like it more?
I think I like it more than Chrono Trigger, yeah. Which... That's
divisive.
That's divisive, I know, that'll get me some shit talking on Twitter, but listen, because I know it's flawed, it has a ton of playable characters, and that means that, like, a lot of the cast is not that fleshed out, but a ton of the cast gets little micro stories throughout the whole, like, major story. And yeah, it has some stupid shit in it, for sure, but I don't know, there's just something really interesting and special about it. And when I played Chrono Trigger, I like Chrono Trigger, I really do. But for me, I think it just depends on which one you play first. For me, for my money, I feel like of the two worlds, Chrono Cross feels more weird and unique. Like, as much as I like Chrono Trigger, it still felt like when I went to play it, it felt like a fantasy game. And Chrono Cross felt like something strange and beautiful. And I love it. I really, really love it. And I must have replayed it 5 or 6 times as a kid because it had a New Game Plus option, so of course I did. And I don't know, it's such a unique little game, that gets shat on because it had the unfortunate problem of coming after like one of the greatest JRPGs of all time. But it's amazing, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, if it hadn't been called Chrono Cross, if it had been called something else entirely, I think people wouldn't have given it such a hard time.
Oh, they absolutely would not have. Like, if it didn't have to compete with Chrono Trigger, it would have been way more well-received.
But, like, go back and play Chrono Cross if you hate it, and just divorce it. And I know that's hard because it does tie into Chrono Trigger in a pretty major way, but, like, divorce it from that game and just take it for what it is. Because that's what I did when I was a kid, because I played it first. And you will be pretty... I mean, you'll be pretty amazed by it, I think. Because it's really good. I mean, it's really, really good. And there were other really great PS1 games, but I think if I had to get passionate about one PS1 game, it would definitely be that one. So yeah, that's my PS1. That's my PS1 game of choice, Ben.
Okay.
How about you? How about your top three favorite N64 games?
My three... Star Fox 64 is one of them, of course.
Of course.
It's gotta be Star Fox 64. I've played Star Fox 64. I brought it with me on a family trip, the 3DS version when it came out. Mm-hmm. And I subsequently managed to beat it, I think, 4 times on that trip alone.
Oh my god.
Like that extended weekend trip, just in the car or whenever I had a free moment, I would play Star Fox 64. And yeah, I would just go on loop over and over again, just do that loop over and over, over and over.
Yeah.
It is the most distilled, perfect, like, rail shooter ever. It's flawless in its simplicity. It's just, the voice acting is so memorable, and, like, every line has become a meme, and I love it. The Star Wolf are, like, my favorite recurring villains in anything. I love Star Wolf. I think they're great. I think it's so disappointing that Pigma and Andrew got excised from the group in the later games because Panther sucks and I hate him. He's the worst. Okay. The whole point of Star Wolf is that they're all counterparts of Star Fox, and you bring it down to 3 members. It doesn't work.
You fucked it up.
It's great. I can always pop in Star Fox 64 and have fun with it.
Right.
My second one, I would have to say, is Paper Mario.
Really?
I think that is one of the greatest RPGs to exist.
Okay.
I think Paper Mario. I think Thousand Year Door is one of my top 3 RPGs of all time. Mm-hmm. But as far as the original Paper Mario goes, it's still pretty far up there.
Right.
It's that perfect distillation of just being, like, quirky and fun, and, like, it's got this kind of, like, weird sort of sarcasm to it, because, like, whenever you get an RPG with Mario, they're allowed to be a bit more free with their dialogue, and they can kind of make the jokes you wouldn't see in, like, a more mainstream Mario. Mm-hmm. And it's fun, and, like, the mechanics behind it are super creative. They have the whole timed hits mechanic, which every RPG should have. Mm-hmm. Every turn-based RPG should have the timed hits mechanic, because it works perfectly.
Oh, sorry, this is a tangent, but also just to bring up, like, another PS1 JRPG, because you just reminded me of it.
Yeah?
Legend of Dragoon!
Oh yeah, Legend of Dragoon, yeah.
It had timed hits, and it was radical. Carry on, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and it's just, like, you got fun, quirky party members who all had unique abilities, and they all had unique dialogue for whenever, if you brought them into a cutscene. It's just fun, enjoyable times.
Yeah.
And then my third one has to be Banjo-Tooie, because
of course, I was waiting for it.
That game took platforming to a whole new level, and it fixed, like, every problem one could have with Banjo-Kazooie, and it just, it's, you know, you rarely get games that are just, like, a step up. like a complete like improvement. Like sequels like will tend to like they'll change something that'll be like a flaw or like something you don't like about it. Like even stuff like Mass Effect 2 had stuff I didn't like about it compared to Mass Effect 1, but like Banjo-Tooie is just an upgrade. And you get these worlds that are much bigger. You have all these new. It's great because, you know, they didn't do the thing where like they roll back your abilities and you have to start over from zero. You start the game with every ability you had in Banjo-Kazooie.
Oh, really?
And then, yeah, like everything you learned in Banjo-Kazooie, you can still do in Banjo-Tooie, and they just give you more.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that's how you do it.
That's how you do it! Because I guess that makes sense, because I read somewhere that, like, you were originally supposed to be able to swap back and forth between the two cartridges?
Yeah, they were going to introduce a thing where, like, you would play Banjo-Tooie to unlock features in Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah.
Like, to unlock secret areas in Banjo-Kazooie, you would have to play Banjo-Tooie and do certain things, and then take the cartridge out of the console while it's on, and put the other cartridge in. And so it didn't end up happening, but like the elements were still kind of there. And it was just like, it's just fun. Like everything about that made Banjo-Kazooie fun was just improved on in Banjo-Tooie.
Right.
And it's easily one of the best platformers I've ever played, and I still need to get around to playing Yooka-Laylee.
Well, I heard it's basically like Banjo-Tooie reskinned. So yeah, you'll love it. Like I know you'll love it because it's just Banjo-Tooie reskinned, and that's fine. So yeah.
And then, did you want to gush? I know you wanted to. Did you want to gush about Final Fantasy VII a bit too?
No, only because I feel like we'll eventually do a podcast about FF7. Because, like, it's Final Fantasy VII and it's the 20-year anniversary of Final Fantasy VII. And if anybody... I will say one thing. If anybody wants to, like call me out and say, like, Final Fantasy VII is overrated, shut up. You're wrong. Final Fantasy VII is not overrated. Final Fantasy VII is exactly as good as people say it is.
It is. It deserves all its ratings. It's good.
Because
it's a really good RPG.
Because Benjamin here didn't play it until you were, what, like 20?
Because,
yeah, it was right after I left my first college, and I played Vesperia, and you played Final Fantasy VII, and so we were like 19 or 20, right?
I had to have been like 20 or 21, yeah, so it was like, and that was the first time I ever played it, because again, I didn't own a PS1, that's the whole point of this episode of the podcast, is I didn't own a PS1.
Right, and the trade-off was I would play Vesperia, which ruined my life, because now I can't shut up about Tales games, and you would play Final Fantasy VII, which didn't ruin your life nearly as much, and I feel like that was some sort of revenge. Probably for Persona 4. But yeah, and Final Fantasy VII holds up. I hate people who say that Final Fantasy VII is overrated, because, okay, it is a little flawed, and it definitely aged, like, visually really poorly, but that's also wrong, because it has some of the best pre-rendered, like, I think my favorite pre-rendered backgrounds on the PS1 are Final Fantasy IX and Chrono Cross. But immediately after those two are Final Fantasy VII's pre-rendered backgrounds, which are the most incredible, like, little slices of cyberpunkia in existence. Like, all of the Midgar level is just incredible. It's just... I mean, the whole first part of the game is beautiful.
Well, yeah. Like, Midgar could have been the entire game, and I would have been just fine with that. Like, you didn't need to go anywhere else. Midgar was...
Yeah, you could have put the entire game in Midgar, and it would have been fine.
It was a unique enough environment, and it had enough variety in it that you could have made the whole game in that one city, and it would have been fine.
It would have been fine. I mean, because the city was big enough, it was basically like a megalopolis. But yeah, people who say that Final Fantasy VII are overrated have no idea what they're talking about, because Final Fantasy VII is so vital for the modern JRPG market. Like...
there are so many games that you can point at elements in that game and say, that's from Final Fantasy VII.
Or you can just say that none of these, like, Persona 5 and the new Tales games and all of these games would not probably exist if it hadn't been for Final Fantasy VII proving that that JRPGs had a niche market to fill, that people wanted long, story-driven games that were kind of slow, because Final Fantasy games start really slowly, generally speaking, and, you know, people had, like, a hunger for big story-based video games, and there had been other releases before 7 that did that. I think Metal Gear Solid predates Final Fantasy. Don't quote me on that one, though. But, like, Final Fantasy VII was huge, and it was different, and it was, like, very Japanese. You don't think about it because it has such a weird setting, but when you replay it, Final Fantasy VII is, like, aggressively Japanese. And people still had a market for it. People still wanted it, and it sold well, and it was like, oh, well, we can market these games to people, and they'll want them, and they'll buy them.
It opened the floodgates, you know? It was like, well, now we can market these games. We don't have to Americanize them anymore. We can just release them as they are.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to worry about changing all the Japanese names to American names. I'm looking at you, Persona 1. And you could just have these games, and people wanted to, and they enjoyed them. And, like, Final Fantasy VII rules. It's fun. It's cool. It's a unique universe. It's not just your standard sword and board fantasy universe. It's something completely different. And it has, still to this day, one of the better casts of any Final Fantasy game ever, because they're just a bunch of fucking weirdos, you know?
They're all very unique and dynamic and great.
Yeah, they're great. So shut up, anybody who says Final Fantasy VII is overrated. We're eventually going to do a podcast about it because Final Fantasy VII is fucking dope.
Yeah, and now just put out the remake. Just make it, please.
It's never happening. No, it's not happening. I've made peace with that. I've made peace with the fact that Final Fantasy VII Remake is never going to happen. I'm going to enjoy... I have taken that little bit of happiness I felt when they announced it, and I've put it in a bottle, and anytime I feel sad, I let those feelings out of the bottle, and I go, I was once that happy in my life. You know? Like, that was a level of happiness that I felt that I will never reach again. I could have a baby and I probably wouldn't be as happy about that being born versus the announcement of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And then I take those feelings and I put them back in a bottle and I screw the lid on and I go, it's never gonna happen, and that's okay.
Now...
Mostly because they'd fuck it up.
Yeah, they're gonna it's gonna either not come out or they're gonna come out and it'll be bad.
It'll be bad. That's it, you know?
Yeah. So. Now, I am really curious, though, because you mentioned Final Fantasy VII, which, of course, is on your list. You mentioned Chrono Cross, of course, it's on your list.
Yeah.
I'm really curious that you put Crash 3 Warped on there, because you don't like platformers.
That's not true. I like some platformers. I don't like the occasional saccharine nature that comes with most platformers. I guess that makes me sound like a total edgelord, and it's fine. I'm not a huge fan. We've talked a lot about Nintendo. I'm really not a big fan of Nintendo's game design philosophy. I know Odyssey is great, but I look at Odyssey and it doesn't make me feel like, oh man, you know? I just kind of go like, oh, it's a Nintendo game. Even though I know Odyssey is great, it's just not for me. You know what I mean? And that's fine, you know, like, we're all different. I don't have to like every single video game that Nintendo makes, and I'm not, you know, it's just not, they're just not my company. You know, that's not my game design ethos, that's not my thematic kind of thing. But I do like the occasional platformer. I mean, I played Jak and Daxter, Jak 2 and Jak 3 like 700 times a piece. And Warped is... I think it's really more about the memories I have attached to Warped versus the actual quality of Warped, but Warped is a very good platformer, because it takes everything that was cool about Crash 1 and 2 and makes it more... It's brighter, it's more colorful, it's bigger, it's faster, it's more fun, it's easy to get to every, like, level. Like, the variety of levels is really unique. Because
I like that. Like, Warped had a lot. I remember Warped being very much more like expansive compared to Crash 1 and 2.
Yeah, exactly. And it was incredibly varied and had a lot of variety going on and just was a good time. And I just have a lot of fond memories of laying around and playing it with my brother when I was a little kid, and then a few years ago when I dropped out of college and came home and spent a whole summer playing PS1 games with my brother before I got my life together. And one of those games we played was Crash Warped. And so, like, some of it is just that I have good memories attached to the actual game while playing it, and some of them is that, yeah, Warped is a pretty good PS1 platformer. It's kind of like what a PS1 3D platformer should be, because 3D platformers on the PS1 could occasionally be a little janky because of the whole we're still getting used to the 3D nature of video games thing. And yeah, just for like pure fun, I think Warped is about as fun as a PS1 platformer could ever be. You know what I mean? Like,
and it gave you a lot more new abilities. It opened things up for you. It was fun.
Yeah.
Like, the few times that I actually got to play a PS1 back when it was around, like, yeah, I would always beeline for Warped when it came out, like, whenever I had the option.
Because it's fun. You know, my other two games on my PS1 list are there because, like Chrono Cross I have very intense feelings of love for, and Final Fantasy VII is like, it's a story, and it was like my first real interaction in a game, for me, personally, not for, like, the industry, because, like I said, Metal Gear Solid had already happened, I think. And so, like, the industry had already gotten games that had, like, a heavier story. But for me, and for a lot of people, Final Fantasy VII was our first interaction with the idea that a video game could have a big, sweeping, emotional story. That could really could affect you in ways. Because, yeah, everybody remembers Aeris's death. Like, yeah, of course. And so, Warped is a little bit less serious, but just for the fun factor. Just a little bit. Just for the fun factor alone, I think Warped is probably one of my favorite old PS1 games. And I could list off a bunch of other ones, because we didn't even talk about stuff like Silent Hill and Resident Evil and things like that. And we've talked about both of those on the podcast before, so we know my feelings towards them. But, like, for my money, if you want to play, like, if somebody was like, recommend me a fun PS1 game, just pure fun that you can play for a night and feel like you had a good time the whole way, and it was still kind of a challenge, you can't go wrong with Crash Bandicoot, and Warped is the best version of Crash Bandicoot as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well,
cool. I love video games. I love the PS1. I love the fucking PS1, man. It's so good. Now I wish
Video games are great. I don't know if you know this or not, but video games are fun.
Video games are pretty... Oh, man! I didn't even talk about the other thing I wanted to bring up real quick, was that I realized...
What was that?
So the PS1 had a problem, right? The first issues of the PS1 kind of had, like, their own version of the Red Ring of Death, where the disc wouldn't read. Like, it'd have a really bad disc read error, and the little laser that would read the disc wouldn't work anymore. So what you had to do, and I actually bought a used PS1 a few years ago, and it happened to me. What you had to do to make it work was you had to flip the console upside down. And you had to play it like that, and that would fix the problem.
I remember hearing about this.
Yeah! So the PS1 I actually own right now, I have to play it flipped upside down. Yeah.
That's incredible and perfect, and it's almost like how I think it was like, I think you could almost fix the Red Ring of Death on the Xbox by...
wrapping it in towels?
Yeah, wrapping it in towels and turning the fan on so that it soldered itself back together.
Yeah. I had a friend who did that. It was kind of like that, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then, like, that's the thing, is the other thing, like, it's the final point, we didn't even talk about it, but yeah, but, like, the whole idea is that, of the N64 and the PS1, like, comparatively, it's like, PS1 is a very flimsy console, and the N64 is a brick.
Yeah, you couldn't kill an N64 with a nuke. You know, like, the N64... No, that's not true. I was about to say the N64 was the last, like, really, really sturdy game console, but then I remembered the GameCube. Which the GameCube, you could bludgeon a man to death with it, and then plug it back in.
The GameCube is indestructible, and so are Wiimotes.
Yeah, the GameCube especially is incredibly sturdy. This is like our final tangent. X-Play? Yeah. You remember X-Play on G4?
I remember X-Play. I know exactly what you're talking about with X-Play.
There is an episode where X-Play beat the shit out of the Xbox, the PS2, and the GameCube, and, I mean, they kicked the living shit out of those three systems, and the GameCube still played after everything, and that's all you need to know about Nintendo.
They took a sledgehammer like a golf club to them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
I don't think the PS2 lasted one round.
No, it didn't. And the Xbox did pretty good, because, I mean, that thing was like a spaceship, you know? Like, you could, like, fly it off a runway. It was so big and huge and strong. But even it eventually broke. But the good old GameCube just kept keeping on. So yeah, that's that Nintendium, man.
Yep.
So yeah, that was an episode full of tangents and non sequiturs, and
that's what happens when we don't actually have a topic lined up for the week. And we have to do what this podcast was originally about, which is just talking about video games for an extended period of time.
I did not think this episode would hit 2 hours, and yet here we are.
No, I didn't either. I thought an hour and a half at the most, but this always happens.
This always happens. I was like, this will be a short one. Wrong.
Nope, it never is.
We can't shut the fuck up about video games. Oh well. It's because video games rule.
So they do. Video games are great. And in fact, once we're done with this, I'm going to go back to be playing Mario Odyssey, and you're going to go back to playing The Last of Us.
Which is pretty much the exact definition of you and I's different video games.
Yeah.
It's all the same. Nothing ever changes. I'm playing a Naughty Dog game.
Yeah, you're playing a Naughty Dog game, and I'm playing the new Mario game.
Oh my god, nothing ever changes. Ever. It's been 20 years, and things are exactly the same. That's amazing.
Video games is the same.
Video games is all the same, man.
So... Thanks to Visager for use of our background music. You can follow us on Twitter at The Gorge Podcast. You can follow us, or you can send us an email about video games at thegorgepodcast@gmail.com. Sarah, talk about your other podcast while I look some stuff up.
Hey, I'm in another podcast called Big Gay Nerds, where me and a bunch of cool friends sit around and play tabletop games. We rotate the schedule every month, and we try out new systems as we go. We're about to start a game called The Quiet Year, which I'm really looking forward to, so you should come check us out. We're at Big Gay Nerds Podcast at Twitter, I think. Shit, I'll get that right someday. We're on biggaynerds.tumblr.com, and we're on SoundCloud at Big Gay Nerds. Thanks. What are you looking up?
I was seeing if we had an email, because I thought we did, but we didn't. It was old message.
Good. Okay, cool.
So, that'll do it for us. Fuck.
The Saturn. I think we can both agree on that one.
But, like, fuck the Saturn, but in more of, like, a dismissive way. Not like an angry way, more like just whatever.
Whatever. Fuck the Saturn.
Fuck the Saturn. It's not even a contender.
Or the Virtual Boy.
Yeah.
And what it did to your eyeballs.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.